My name is Abba Blankson. I'm the Senior Vice President for Marketing and Communications for the NAACP. We are honored and excited about our powerful panel of leaders for tonight's conversation about the priorities for the new Biden-Harris administration. And we very much look forward to an informative and engaging conversation. If you want to stay involved or want to support the social justice work of the NAACP, go to naacp.org/forward to get involved. For our phone participants, if at any time you have a question, please dial *3. If you're watching on social media, YouTube or Facebook, you can leave us a message or a question at NAACP. With that, I'd like to introduce NAACP President and CEO, Derek Johnson. President Johnson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Abba. And I want to thank everyone who's joining us tonight from across the country. It is definitely an honor and a privilege to be a part of this most robust conversation with some of the most dynamic women, most powerful women in the country, Black, white, green, or yellow. For the NAACP, we are proud to be the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization with a history of advocacy, and that is our role. And in this critical moment where we are in the juncture of deciding whether we're going to go forward into a future or allow the forces of evil pull us back to a 1950 reality. For these great women, for the NAACP, and for all of you, I am assured that when we fight, we win. And the fight we're going to take on is to ensure we move into the future. Joining us tonight is April Ryan, a White House correspondent, recently joined the GRIO, and a close friend and active member of the NAACP. April, thank you for moderating this most robust panel this evening.
Thank you so much, President Johnson. Always, I'm here for you anytime you call. And this is indeed a night to be a part of. And I want to tell everyone, go run and tell your friends, text them, call them. This is a moment that you need to listen to because it affects you. Just like President Johnson says, this is a magnificent, momentous night. And I want you to go to any of the NAACP platforms, to include YouTube and Facebook, and tune in. Please, this is a night that you do not want you or your friends or family to miss, because tonight we have with us Ambassador Susan Rice, the Domestic Policy Advisor for the Biden-Harris administration. We have, on the eve of her confirmation hearing, Secretary-designate, yes, Marcia Fudge, for Housing and Urban Development. I see that fist pump. Okay. All right. We have Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. And we could be joined by others, but I want you all to stay tuned because what they have to say is so important because it affects you. Now, our nation is facing an extraordinary crisis in racial justice. Coronavirus is harming Black and Brown communities at staggering rates due to a longstanding health and environmental and economic disparities. Police violence against Black people is at an epidemic level, and the Oval Office was just occupied by someone who championed white supremacy and bigotry. This moment requires bold and meaningful action to end systemic racism. And before we start, I want to give you a pause for the occasion. The first 100 days. And the first 100 days started out in the Roosevelt presidency. It is a convenient time to measure against campaign promises, fulfilling appointments, and promise policies from the campaign, etc. And with that, I want to start off with Ambassador Susan Rice, who is the Domestic Policy Advisor for this administration. She's also been designated as the Race Equity Czar, if you will. Ambassador Rice, what are your priorities for the first 100 days, and what are your most urgent priorities, if you can give us that?
Thank you so much, April. Good evening, everyone. I was going to give some remarks at the outset, I think, and then I thought we were going to go to questions. Do I have that wrong?
Yes, you've got it. You've got it.
Okay, great. I just want to say at the start what a great honor it is to join this virtual town hall at such an important crossroads in our nation's history. I want to thank President Johnson for his leadership and for the invitation to speak tonight, and to say to all of you who are staff members and supporters of the NAACP, how much we are all grateful, how much I personally am grateful for your tireless and vital advocacy for justice. The legacy you continue to uphold is in no small part why I'm here addressing you tonight as a representative of what is now the most diverse administration this country has ever seen. And to my friends and colleagues, Congresswoman Beatty, and hopefully we'll be joined by Congresswoman Bass and Secretary-designate Fudge, wishing you all the best for your confirmation hearing tomorrow, and so looking forward to working with you. I want to thank you all for every day showing the world what we can accomplish when we have effective, powerful Black women in leadership. I'm here not only to speak about the Biden administration's commitment to advancing racial justice and equity, but I'm here to ask for your partnership and support in implementing an equity agenda whose ambition matches the urgency of this moment. Last week, President Biden began to turn the page on a divisive and destructive chapter in American history. He took office at a time of crisis that has tested our strength and our unity, a relentless pandemic, a flagging economy, the universal threat of climate change, the persistent stain of racial injustice. No one has been untouched by these crises, but like so many times before, Black and brown communities have carried the heaviest share of the burden. We've fallen ill and died of COVID in greater numbers due to lack of access to quality health care. We've watched our small businesses shut down, leaving 1 in 10 Black Americans unemployed. And while George Floyd and Breonna Taylor's murders awakened our nation belatedly to the fact of systemic racism, for many, and for us, these tragedies were yet another reminder of an all too familiar reality. It's not enough simply to recover and rinse our hands or try to rinse our hands of the prior administration. As President Biden has said so many times before, we must build back better than it was. And that's why the equity agenda is not just a question of policy. It's the bedrock on which we will build a government for all people. Racial equity is in our economy, our neighborhood, our very democracy. It's the opportunity for every child to realize the promise of America. President Biden's commitment to equity is broad and it's deep. On day one, he signed an executive order mandating a whole of government effort to embed racial equity across federal policies, programs, and laws. And that starts with a review of our government institutions to dismantle systemic racism where it exists and advance equity where we're falling short. Every agency will be required to place equity at the core of their mission to ensure that government resources are reaching marginalized communities. And under the Biden administration, the federal government will become a national model on diversity and inclusion. From hiring and procurement to data and access, we must and we will hold ourselves accountable. Yesterday, the president announced a set of executive actions in justice and equity with immediate impact. He directed the Department of Housing and Urban Development to advance fair housing rules and combat housing discrimination. He tasked all agencies to fight xenophobia, including against our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, and to strengthen federal engagement with Native tribes. He did all of that because he is emphasizing that whether you're Black or brown or Native or Asian, and you have been left behind by our government and its policies, it's time for this government to serve all of us. And President Obama directed the Attorney General not to renew contracts with private prisons, taking profit out of our criminal justice system. Now we're focused on passing through Congress a comprehensive pandemic response package called the American Rescue Plan to deliver relief to the American people. This plan puts equity at the heart of our national strategy to combat this health and economic crisis. If passed by Congress, the American Rescue Plan would cut the poverty rate for Black families in this country by more than a third. Cut poverty for Black families by more than a third and boost the earnings of millions of Black workers. It commits $20 billion to expanding access to vaccines, to personal protective equipment and healthcare providers in our hardest hit communities of color. With estimates showing that up to 40% of Black-owned businesses have been forced to close, this plan provides for direct aid to small businesses and increases the value of unemployment insurance. The American Rescue Plan promises immediate relief to working families and lays the foundation for a long-term equitable recovery. We need your support to get this done. Throughout this effort, we have to remember that racial equity is not just an issue for Black communities and brown communities. It's vital to building a society that expands opportunity for all Americans. Investing in rent relief, student loan relief, nutrition, childcare, public education, and healthcare access will directly benefit Black people and other people of color who've been left behind by a system built on discrimination. But it will also spark a rising tide of economic and job growth to lift up all communities facing hardship, persistent poverty, and deferred justice. Racial discrimination has cost the United States an estimated $16 trillion over the past two decades. Closing that income and opportunity gap could add $5 trillion to the national economy and 6 million new jobs over the next 5 years. A dollar invested in equity is a dollar invested in the vitality, health, and unity of our nation. Despite our stark political divisions, we are still one country and we rise and fall together. All of these actions are just a down payment on what will be an unrelenting march forward. Redressing historic inequities requires the kind of historic commitment that President Biden has already made. And my pledge to you is that we will not shy away from the challenge. Under our leadership and the leadership of the Domestic Policy Council, we will make racial equity a primary focus. I've assembled a highly qualified team to drive this agenda with me, led by Catherine Lehman, who brings extensive civil rights experience from all levels of government. And I'll have the support of every major White House office and every federal agency in this work. Because as President Biden has made it clear, advancing equity is everybody's job. My own family story, like so many of yours, is one of generations of Americans standing strong in the face of racism to try to claim their right to equality and opportunity. My great-grandfather escaped slavery in South Carolina to fight for his freedom in the Union Army. He went on to get a college degree and founded the Bordentown School in New Jersey, which educated Black kids for nearly 70 years. And while my father grew up in the heart of Jim Crow and served as an airman at Tuskegee during World War II, he overcame the barriers of segregation to ultimately serve as a governor of our Federal Reserve. My mother was the child of immigrants from Jamaica who raised their 5 children in, believe it or not, Portland, Maine, and sent them all to college on a maid and a janitor's salary. And my mother, Lois Rice, dedicated her career to helping other poor kids to have the same opportunity and education she did. And she was known as the mother of the Pell Grant program, which has enabled some 80 million Americans to attend college. Their struggle, their service and sacrifice inspires me to this day. Their refusal to give up on a country that all too often gave up on them. And that's why we can't be satisfied with the pace of our progress. When prejudice still holds back so many Black Americans, when your zip code determines your future, when Black Americans continue to lose their lives because of the color of their skin, how can we say to our children that we're even doing nearly enough? From Reconstruction to the Civil Rights era to the 2020 election, Black workers, families, and voters have never stopped pushing this country forward and demanding we live up to our greatest ideals. President Biden is determined to help see their vision realized. The painful crises we're facing as a nation have laid bare our collective failure to build an equitable society. Now we have a chance to shape a recovery that charts a different course, but we can't do it alone. If we're going to succeed, we need each and every one of you helping us to lead the way and standing by our side. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Rice. We're going to go to Uh, Secretary-designate Marcia Fudge for HUD and Urban Development. She's going to the Senate tomorrow for confirmation hearings. And if and when you are confirmed, in recent administrations, the idea of the first 100 days is to get off to a good start, especially if you want to undo orders the prior administration had. But what is your idea for the first 100 days for HUD?
Thank you, April, my good friend, my sister. It's nice to see you.
And
Certainly, I
so,
want to
Laura.
thank. Right. Thank you. I want to thank my good friend, President Johnson, for his outstanding leadership and the NAACP for always standing when we need you most. So we thank you. Um, I want to thank President Biden because what he has already done in this very, very short period of time is to let us all know that we can once again have faith in government. He is going to restore our faith in government. And I say it this way, he is going to make sure that we take care of and assist those who live on the outskirts of hope. There's so many people in this country who don't know where they're going to get their next meal or where they're going to lay their head. And so we are going to be there to let them know that government can and will make a difference in their lives. If I'm confirmed, my first 100-day goals will be number one, is to provide the leadership and the vision that HUD is so sorely lacking. We need to be able to say to the people who have given their lives and their careers to this work, those people who work in HUD, that there is a new day and that we're going to do the right thing. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that every single citizen of this nation has a roof over their head. That is the very least we can do. We're going to make sure that the millions of households who are currently at risk of losing their homes and apartments know that we have a plan that is going to keep them in their homes. We want to be sure that every single person understands that fair housing is not something we talk about, it is something that we do. So that every single person has access to the credit they need and access to the mortgages they need. I don't know if you're aware, but that homeownership amongst Black people is the same as it was in 1968 when the Fair Housing Act was passed. So we want to be sure, as Ambassador Rice talked about, that there is racial equity. I am so, so happy that Ambassador Rice is going to take this on. It is long overdue. And I firmly believe that we are going to let people know that right is right. And we're going to do the right thing. We want to make sure that there is some guidance to people who are coming out of foreclosure and out of forbearance so that they don't lose their homes. And lastly, I just want to say that there is much to be done, but we are going to do our part. Certainly, as Ambassador Rice says, we can't do everything and we certainly can't do it alone, but we're going to do our part. And we're going to make people know that we care and that we're going to make a difference. Thank you, April.
Thank you, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who is the Secretary-designate for Housing and Urban Development. She's going tomorrow to the Senate for her confirmation hearings. We got her on the eve of confirmation. And we know that Ambassador Susan Rice is still doing the people's work. She has got to get on a call very soon. But we want to ask Ambassador Susan Rice, the Domestic Policy Advisor, a few more questions before she has to go. And we're very cognizant of your time, Ambassador, and we thank you. What policies can be implemented through the use of executive orders? We already know a lot has already happened. There's been a flurry of executive orders the moment this president came into office. What is it, 6, 7 days now? And then what will require congressional action in this realm?
Well, April, thanks for the question. I mean, we've got a huge amount on our agenda, and we deliberately tried to come out of the gates fast with as much action that the president himself could initiate as we could possibly make him sign in the first few days. But and there's still much more that can be done by executive action in all sorts of realms. But the reality is that very important things do require legislation. So, the kinds of things we can do by executive action are the things that you've seen some of which this week. The president got rid of Donald Trump's ridiculous and odious 1776 commission that was trying to rewrite American history. He revoked President Trump's order, order banning the teaching of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal government and with federal contractors and recipients of federal grants, which was, chilling sectors across our nation. He could put in place the whole of government mandate to make sure that when we deal with issues of equity, that we're dealing with it using all the tools of the federal government. But what he can't do without Congress and without legislation is pass major legislation or move money. So I spoke about the American Rescue Plan, which is the president's first major effort to help Americans suffering so much from COVID-19. And in that package is a lot of money for vaccines, for continued testing, for opening our schools, for helping communities that have suffered the most have relief, and putting an additional $1,400 in every needy American's pocket, so that $2,000, which we wanted and never got at the end of last year, adds up to $1,400 plus the $600 will be $2,000. Extending unemployment benefits. There's so, making it possible for those who are suffering the burden of terrible rent to have relief. Those are the kinds of things that require legislative action for the most part. And that's why it's so important that we have support to work with Congress to get Congress to do its job, which the Democrats very much want to. But, we have also got very slim majorities. And we're going to need to be able to try to get all the votes we possibly can to move this very important legislation.
Since the campaign, Ambassador Rice, I've been writing stories that have the words all of government approach. What does that mean? The average American doesn't understand necessarily the all of government approach. Can you explain it, please?
Yeah, we actually call it, April, a whole of government approach, which is even probably more confusing than an all of government approach. What it means is that we're not just doing things in little isolated silos, one agency at a time. We're using the convening power of the White House, which has the ability to direct what happens to a substantial extent in every agency, and making them work together towards a common objective. That's what we mean by whole of government. So if I'm the person in the White House leading our efforts on racial equity, I will pull together the leaders of President Biden's cabinet to ensure that whether we're talking about education or housing or criminal justice or environmental justice or voting rights or civil rights or you name it, that we have all of the agencies that need to be participating in those policy-making discussions at the table, that they're there for the recommendations and the decision-making, and they're there for the implementation, and that they're being held accountable for results. That's what we mean by whole of government.
So, Secretary-designate, I want to get into the weeds about the whole of government approach. Can you explain how HUD will integrate with other agencies so that it could change this dynamic of disparity and inequity in this nation?
I'd be happy to, April. And let me say that I'm so glad that our chair of the CBC is with us as well, because we're going to be relying very heavily on Representative Beatty and others to assist us with the Congress, because a lot of it, as the ambassador said, really should go through Congress. But let me just answer your question directly. One of the things that we have been lacking over many years is the ability to work across agencies and departments. So you cannot do housing in a vacuum and not include the VA because of veterans housing, or include interior because of Native American housing, or include even some rural housing that comes under agriculture. So the first thing we need to do is we need to look at it in its totality. And we need to come up with a plan, a public financing plan, a public plan for how we get mortgages out, The mission of HUD is to put people in housing. That is our job. And so, but we cannot do it in a silo. So the thing that I'm looking forward to is working with the other secretaries, if we are all confirmed, and to sit down and come up with a plan that we know can make work. The president has already committed to building 1.5 million new homes, affordable and low income homes, over the next 10 years. He's already committed to empowering communities with some $600 billion over the next 10 years. So we just need to make sure that we are moving in the right direction and letting communities know that we are about to empower their communities to do some things that we've not been able to do in a very, very long time. And I think that's when you talk about it, the whole. The whole is to make sure that everybody that should be involved is involved, and that across every single agency, we are going to make sure that it is fair, that it is equitable, and that we take into consideration the systematically um, process of denying people of color and low income people what we deserve. I think that's how I see it, April.
Well, thank you. And you broke right at time because Ambassador Rice has got to go to get on a call to do the people's business. And do you have anything you would like to add, Ambassador Rice?
Well, I just want to, first of all, thank you, April, for doing this. I want to thank President Johnson for the invitation and again for your extraordinary leadership. Congresswoman Beatty, I so much appreciated your friendship and partnership, and I look very much forward to working with you and with the whole CBC on this vitally important agenda. And to our Secretary-designate, Marcia Fudge, good luck tomorrow. You're going to do great, and I can't wait for you to be in the seat. It's going to be a powerful team, and I can't wait to partner with you. And I just want to say to our audience, thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your support. We have to do this together. The job is huge. The hurdles are high. The suffering is immense. And this is an opportunity to really make change. But it's going to require all of us working hard and rowing in the same direction, because there remain powerful forces that want us to fail. And we can't let them succeed. So thank you again, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Ambassador Rice. Thank you so much. Now let's bring into the conversation Congressional Black Caucus Chair Joyce Beatty. I have to say this before we even bring her on. You know what happened on January 6th. She said, "I will not be bullied," and she made it a point to be at that inauguration on January 20th. And that's just what she's saying. She says she's not going to be bullied. She's ready to fight for Black and Brown America, for all America. And Congresswoman Beatty, thank you so much for joining in. She is the new chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm listening to these staggering numbers. Your fellow soon to be, well, you're not Congresswoman anymore. She is former Congresswoman colleague. She said something staggering. Black America has housing ownership rates like 1968. We're in 2021. Bill Clinton had the highest number of Black home owners during his administration, and we have now gone backward. And then Susan Rice said, racial discrimination has cost $16 trillion over the decades. How is the CBC planning on attacking this with this administration? You're on mute.
Well, first of all, let me join others and thank you, Mr. President, Derek Johnson, a good friend, and for always standing in the gap and playing a leadership role with the NAACP, which I'm proud to be a life member. So I thank you for calling us together. And it's important for everyone listening to understand that we are fighting for all Americans, but especially Black Americans. In April, thank you for always being in the right place at the right time, doing what's right. And certainly appreciate this to Ambassador Susan Rice. I want to thank her for not only being in the position she's being in, but making sure that racial justice and equity is throughout every cabinet, every agency. And with her leading our domestic policy agenda, we're very proud at the CBC. It's important to know that she came early to meet with us. On day one, she scheduled a meeting with me and has had meetings after that. There's not enough I can say about Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. I'm going to say that for the last time, Madam Secretary, soon to be. Thank you for all of the work that you've done for families and children and in the housing space over your entire life in all of your positions. We look forward to working with you. April, that question is so right on time when you hear the facts that soon to be Secretary of HUD, Marcia Fudge, has mentioned and the $16 trillion that the ambassador talked about. We know how serious that is. And that's why we have fought very hard to continue the forbearances on mortgages to March 31st. That's why we've also made sure that individuals would not be evicted while we're in this three-headed pandemic. Certainly it is COVID-19, but it's also the economic turmoil that we're in, and certainly housing and food and securities fall within that and other things. And then the injustices. Black people have been treated disproportionately different for all of our existence. When we think of the disparities that we have heard in the housing space, when we think of what happens with the 12 million people who haven't received their increase with SNAP, I think housing and food goes hand in hand. And I think that's why soon to be HUD Secretary talked about housing for veterans and talked about the housing space and how it connects with agriculture and the other departments. So we're going to be out in the front line with the Congressional Black Caucus as we look at our first 100 days. Certainly COVID-19 is at the top of our list. Black people make up 13% of the national's population, yet when we look at the death rate for COVID-19, we're at 18 and 20%. When we look at economic development and the wealth gap, 41% of Black businesses have been devastated because of COVID-19. And then when we look at the injustices, I can start by simply saying George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, something we passed in the 116th Congress. I'm pleased to say it's going to be on our front burner as we continue in the 117th. We're very strong. We have created for the first time within the Congressional Black Caucus a domestic policy council led by our Senator Cory Booker and Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Also serving on that is our Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn. We're coming strong because our tagline is our power, our message. We will release our 100 days plan at the end of next week as we prepare to also kick off Black History Month. And also, I think that's important because what we have decided to do, while we respect all of those shoulders who we stand on, including our 13 founders of the Congressional Black Caucus, but our theme is going to be living Black history. So we're going to talk about our historic 58 members as we talk about Black history. So thank you. I look forward to any of the other questions, but we have a lot of work to do, and we are very thankful that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, of course, a former CBC member, that they are working with us. They are out front on all of the issues that we have identified for us. And we know as we look at the disparities that we will continue to be in this fight.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. We have one of your fellow colleagues, someone who used to be the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, the most recent past president, California Congresswoman Karen Bass. Hello, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me on with everybody. Three chairs of the Congressional Black Caucus.
How about that? How about that? That is the truth. That is the truth. And the elevation keeps going and keeps going. The CBC is a powerful, you call yourselves the conscience of the caucus. Talk to me about that in this moment of transformation and expectancy.
Absolutely. The conscience of the Congress, the whole Congress, not just the Democratic caucus, but I think that our current chair laid it out beautifully. All of the issues that we are facing today, and we're all thrilled with the new administration. It's like a weight has been lifted off of us. But at the same time, we know that we have to be there pushing. And so the example that I'll give, and I'm just jumping on if someone has said this already, is COVID. Last year, one of the big things that we worked on was really focusing on the extreme disproportionate infection and death rate that African Americans were facing because of COVID. And so we joined together with the other ethnic caucuses, and we have been fighting up until this day to make sure that equity means sometimes you give more, you focus your efforts. And so if we're going to approach COVID equitably, then that means that there needs to be target, concentrated, focused efforts in our community specifically, and then especially around the vaccine and doing education. I am a little tired of hearing people only talk about Tuskegee, because it's not about what happened many years ago. It's about what happens every day in hospitals all the time. We talk about the blue wall of silence in policing. Well, as a former healthcare worker, let me just tell you something. There's no blue wall stronger than the medical blue wall. And then I think we all saw an example of that African-American female doctor who literally on her deathbed had to describe how, even as a physician, she was completely misappropriately treated. And so COVID, the pandemic, health-wise, as well as the economic crisis, are examples of how we demonstrate we are the conscious of the Congress, because we educate everybody about these issues while we fight on behalf of our communities at the same time.
Wow. It's very important. But I want to throw this out to all of you, and then we're going to go to questions really fast. And Congresswoman Fudge, Secretary-designate, we thank you for your time, and I know you're prepping for tomorrow. That is huge. That is very big. But I want to ask you this. In the midst of this moment that you have to have targeted approaches, is it okay? Because people are trying to figure out, people are saying, oh, you got to give them time. But is it okay for people to say, wait a minute, I need help? And I'm not even going to say, is it okay? The accountability piece is still there. You don't get action unless you ask in a lot of instances in Washington. So what do you say about the fact that there are still issues and people have asks? So where do they go from there? Because people are concerned, give them a chance. This is a new historic administration, and give them a chance, but you still have to fight at the same time. How do you do that in this transformational moment?
If I could just say this before I jump off, April, it is their responsibility. It really is people's responsibility to push us, to say, I know what you said, but I need you to do this. I need to see it. I know what you intend to do, but when are you going to do it? I believe that is why I have so much appreciation for people like Derek Johnson, because they push. That is their role. Our role is to respond and let people know that help is on the way. But I think that it is fine and it is okay. It doesn't show that you don't support the new administration. It doesn't show that you don't like them. It is what we do when we give our votes and we give our support and we give our promise. I think it's the right thing to do.
There you go. That's democracy. That's democracy in action. That's not about loyalty. That's about democracy. And thank you, Secretary-designate Marsha Fudge, for joining us. She's we know she's got to go because she's preparing for tomorrow. And I want to throw to Abba now. Abba, we've got some questions from people who want to hold this group of leaders accountable, and that is democracy. We cannot be, bullied into submission, as we saw in the last administration. Yes, I said that. But moving on.
Yes, we have a question from Matthew in DC. Matthew, you're on live. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having me on. I'm a retired Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal for 32 years of public service. And in 2008, a jury awarded a landmark D.C. U.S. District Court verdict finding systemic racial discrimination throughout the United States Marshal Service. And today, now I'm the class agent representing over 1,000 Black U.S. Marshals versus the U.S. Department of Justice, going back to 1994. then the last four administrations could not resolve the class issues that are pervasive racism within our rank and file. And we know that if you got bigots with badges working next to us as colleagues, we know what these people will do to the public, to the folks in the public. So that's always been my argument. But the issue is this. We testified in 1997 before the CBC when Maxine Waters was there. She told us we did very wonderful coming forward, telling our stories. Since that time, they have fired, come after every one of us. One of us was suspiciously killed in New York. A lot of things have happened to us, but yet the class continues to remain today. Here it is in 2000. We're in 21 in that class. We've gone through 4 administrations, and nobody has settled this class. In the meantime, all the people that have come forward have been hurt. So my question is this. Will you push this administration to settle this class action by making the U.S. Marshals whole who stood up against racism when nobody else wanted to? And will you call on me to determine how we can combat these bigots with badges in the near future? I'm a race relations expert in law enforcement and have a pending book, Bigots with Badges, but I really want to know, we got to do something now from the internal. What will the CBC commit to when it comes down to this law?
That's right. Now let's get the answer. Thank you for putting it there. Let's get the answer from the current head of the CBC. Yes, Congresswoman.
So thank you so much. First, let me say thank you for that question. And here's the commitment that we can make. We will call you, get the information. I welcome hearing all of the rest of the facts that we don't have time for tonight. We will stand up for it. We stand up for justice. And we know firsthand what it's like to have internal folks who are supposed to protect you. And we know that they all don't protect us. The January 6th insurrection with the takeover of the Capitol, there are folks on the inside who were wearing badges, who were Capitol Police, who were there to protect us. And they were as bad as those involved, and some of them involved in the insurrection. So sometimes it's the time. I'm sorry that you have had to wait through the 4 administrations, but I definitely will reach out to you after the call. We will get you on a Zoom only because we're not in offices, and we will look into this. And it is also one of our top priorities.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And I think about the Black farmers, how many presidents, how many administrations it took the Black farmers to finally get their money and get restitution for it. So sometimes it happens slowly, but it happens. Abba, let's go to the next question, please.
Yeah, we have Rochelle in Georgia with a question about the HEROES Act. Rochelle, go ahead with your question.
Yes, please. I want to know if they're going to pass the HEROES Act and what force is there on getting nonviolent first offenders out of federal prisons and into home confinement. I know the pandemic justice reform was in that HEROES Act.
Thank you, caller. Congresswoman Bass, what do you know about that HEROES Act?
Sure. Well, first of all, what I know is, and I feel very confident about, is that we are going to pass a COVID relief bill very, very soon. And we're able to do that because we maintained our majority in the House, have the majority in the Senate, and can use a parliamentary procedure in order to pass it. It won't be called the HEROES Act. That was a former bill. But the point is that the relief that is needed for people will be there. I don't believe that there would be a measure in there to release low-level offenders automatically, but I will tell you that that's one of the other COVID issues that CBC has been leading on, and that is that it was obvious that COVID was going to spread in prisons, and not only have inmates been dying, but so have staff. And you know what? We need to have vaccines in prisons too. I know people don't want to talk about that, but the fact of the matter is 85% of the people who are incarcerated do come home. Guess which zip codes they come to? Our communities. So we have to make sure that people are healthy when they're released, and also that they're able to successfully reintegrate. So we'll have to look at it. The package is being put together now. I'm not sure what we're saying in terms of the Bureau of Prisons, but you should know that we have followed up on previous legislation that we did. We did legislation that allowed the Bureau of Prisons to release people, and then they really didn't follow through. So we have been advocating for the release especially of vulnerable inmates, people with underlying conditions, people who are older, et cetera.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. How about next question, please?
We have Dorian in Texas. Go ahead with the question.
Hi, how you doing? I'd just like to
Fine.
thank
Question, please,
President
caller.
Thank you. I'd like to thank President Johnson for having me on. And I just wanted to state that, I'm an orphan, a veteran, a college graduate, a victim of wrongful arrest, and the VA executive chairman of the Denton chapter of the NAACP. And, I'm just listening to everyone, and I commend the vice president for her victory and everything. But we can't put all the responsibility on one woman. She has things going on internationally. So I'm thinking, it's time to prepare for war in a time of peace. So why can't we put our own platform together and provide us with these resources, propaganda, more literature, and things like that for the guys that are on an unreachable scale? I know individuals that are fatherless, motherless, and they see 10 times more drug dealers than they do an NAACP representative. And I just want to change that and make this platform as big as possible.
Thank you for your question. Congresswoman Beatty?
Well, let me just say thank you for that question. And part of what you are hearing tonight is the plan that we're putting together, especially for Black American. And I'm pleased that my colleague is here. And I want you to know I brought this with me because this is the document that Congresswoman Karen Bass and our leadership put together that is a plan. So let me reach out to you after this call. Next week, we will release our plan. There are specific things. You talked about wrongful arrest. I can tell you in the 116th and the 115th, it was the Black members on the Judiciary Committee that wrote the First Step Act. I can tell you when we look at the George Ford Justice and Policing Act, which deals with many of those things, it was the Congressional Black Caucus, and more specifically, Congresswoman Karen Bass of the Judiciary that wrote and carried that. So maybe what we should do a better job of is getting you the information. We're not putting our trust in any one person. I can tell you that the Congressional Black Caucus is very strong. We're on point, and we're going to come out even stronger right now. And we do have the majority on our side. We also have the 50-50 in the Senate and the White House administration. So you will hear a lot more.
President Johnson, I want to throw this question to you as well from this last caller. You were very instrumental, along with the other civil rights organizations, in your conversation then President-elect Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. By an agenda purposes, you called for the race and losing rights and issues of equity. Can you talk to us about what the caller said, along with the push for more and information and giving the information to the public?
There's a civil rights song that says freedom is a constant struggle. And none of this can be solved in a year or 2 years when we're looking at something that was created over 400 years. For the NAACP, we understand the power of local communities, the powers of individuals to push towards a solution that best fit us. The reason why we call for a person to hold a portfolio of racial equity is because it's about the policies that this president said that he would support as a priority and not about the individuals. I use the example that we had an African American as the head of HUD with the previous administration, and it was one of the most regressive tenures in terms of civil rights we've seen in recent memory. So it's not about people, it's about policy priority. And so for the NAACP, for all of our members, for all those who care about justice and opportunity, we must continue to push for equitable policies, but recognize things won't change overnight that took 400 years to create.
Our next question.
Yes, April, we have a question from V in Chicago. V, go ahead with your question.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking my question. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. My question is in reference to the pandemic and its relief fund. I'm wondering, for those of us who have been working during the pandemic, like myself, I work just about every day remotely, we struggle too. I'm struggling to maintain my home, and it appears that there's no relief for those that are working. The focus has been more so to those who are not, and I don't want to discount them because I know they need assistance too. But what about those of us who work? What can the government do to assist us? And how can I help get involved with things locally through the NAACP to help my fellow people who may not be working? How can I support them during this time?
So let's
Well,
go to, okay, go ahead, Congresswoman.
Let me take the first part of it because it's income based. You could be working, and as long as in the last set of dollars that you were at $75,000 or less, you were eligible for the relief. Even those who were working in small businesses were eligible for the PPP plan. So one of the things we want to make sure, it's not just for those who were unemployed, they were eligible for the additional personal unemployment dollars. But it wasn't like there wasn't any relief. In the first packet, it was even higher income level.
And I would like to go to President Johnson to also answer that question. And unfortunately, we are closing out this vital 100-day virtual town hall. And I encourage all of you who were on the line to ask questions. Please reach out to your congressional leaders, reach out to the NAACP. That's what they're there for. And we have a limited amount of time, but this is very impactful and important information. And I'm turning it over to President Johnson to answer that caller's question about how to get involved with the NAACP. And I want to say thank you to the NAACP for having me once again for these very informative and impactful and empowering sessions. It's very important. Take it away, President Johnson.
Thank you, caller. And I tell people social justice is not a competition. There may be a strong or vibrant NAACP in your area, but if it isn't, find an organization that's actually an advocacy organization or a service provider that care about our community and providing for our communities. We've existed for 111 years old, soon to be 112 years old. And in some communities, we are very strong. We are advocates. We advocate for public policy change. In other communities, there may be another lead organization that care about our community. And so I tell people, get involved wherever you can identify a match for your energy, your time, and the need. Because there are so many things that we can do as a community, whether it's service providing or advocacy. But more importantly, the first part of your question is really key. That we have many workers who are underemployed. You have many individuals who make up the critical worker pool. We will be advocating for relief for critical workers who fall just outside of unemployed, but not making enough to be considered wealthy. That's really important. In order for our economy to go, we must address the student loan crisis as we see it. We must not only do policies that deal with suspending rent for the moment, but as the future Secretary of HUD talked about, how do we create a ladder so people can get home ownership? And all of those things seems far away for someone who's struggling today. But in the midst of that is for us, the chair of the CBC, the former chair of the CBC, the Secretary of HUD, to hear your input to figure out what type of policy considerations that could address your needs in this moment. We have 14 months, and I measure that based on after 14 months, we're back into midterm election politics again. And so we have 14 months where this administration, the House and the Senate, can do some major overhauls, some impactful things to support communities that we come from and individuals like you. It is going to be our role as NAACP to push them to do it.
And President Johnson, now you're going to close us out. And well, before we do that, Congresswoman Bass and Congresswoman Bailey, do you have anything close us out with in 30 seconds or less?
I just want to say people should tune in tomorrow at 10 o'clock and see Marsha Fudge become the Secretary of Health and Human Services. How about that?
Okay.
And I want to say thank you to the NAACP. Get active in all of your communities where there is one. And I want to again thank Derek Johnson for always being there for the people. Get involved with your NAACP. It makes a difference. And thank you, Congresswoman Bass, for being here. And just know, Congressional Black Caucus, our power, our message.
The conscience of the Congress, according to Congresswoman Karen Bass, not just the conscience of the caucus, but the whole entire Congress. We're talking about the Congressional Black Caucus. There is power coming out of this organization that is fighting for communities that look like us. Now, once again, this was the first 100 days virtual town hall. And I want to set the occasion again. The reason why the first 100 days matters, it started out with President Roosevelt. It was a convenient time to measure against campaign promises. It was fulfilling appointments, promised policies from the campaign, etc. But in recent administrations, the idea is to get off to a good start, especially if you want to undo orders that the prior administration had. And we're seeing that right now. Ambassador Susan Rice, who's the domestic policy advisor who was with us, already said we've already seen a slew of executive orders, and there are more to come. And they're incorporating the whole of government, meaning the agencies will be integrated on efforts to work for you and deal with issues of inequity to make them equitable. And with that said, I thank you. I'm your moderator, April Ryan. I turn it over to the president of the NAACP, President Derek Johnson. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, April. Thank you, Chairwoman Beatty and Chairwoman Bass, and to all of you who have joined us this evening. In 1941, there was an executive order that President Roosevelt issued. He issued that executive order because there was a demand. That demand came from A. Philip Randolph, who threatened to have a march on Washington if that president did integrate armed services. As a result of that executive order, African Americans from across the country for the first time was able to enlist in the Army in mass and actually fight in World War II, showing that not only did we believe in the nation's creed that all men and women are created equal, we will fight for it. As we sit here in 2021, we must fight for what we believe in. January 6th sent a message that you have a set of individuals who are so dogmatic in their belief of a superior race that they're willing to commit treason. They put this democracy in danger. They put us in danger. That exemplify what is actually at stake. For the NAACP, we're asking you to join us in this fight to make democracy work, to ensure that the government that we own is the government that represents our interests. We aren't victims of this government. We pay taxes. And those taxes should show up in ways in which, like the woman who came on previously, really addressed the needs and interests of her family, although she worked every day. Those tax dollars should show up in ways in which we can ensure quality education for all children. Those tax dollars need to show up in ways in which our communities are made whole, not only for the past injuries, but for the future opportunities. So as we start this journey with this new administration as advocacy, as an advocate in this advocacy organization, we must stand together because we know when we fight, we win. But we also know if we don't fight, there is nothing to win. Here is our opportunity to make democracy work, not only for this nation, but for our future. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and look forward to future town hall meetings where we will bring innovative and creative voices around how we can add value to this nation and make a difference for our future. Thank you. Have a good night.